Chilling tales for dark nights.
Want to make sure you never miss a Chilling Tales for Dark Nights video again? Be sure to subscribe and hit that bell to turn on notifications.
I'm Deputy Carl Hayford, and these are the events of August 28th. The full story, all of it, including what I couldn't put in my official statement. It was a slow night. All of the patients were nice and cozy in their rooms, locked behind reinforced doors and windows that looked out into the shared hallway. The smell of antiseptic cleaner and bleach still lingered from the maintenance crew's weekly scrubbing. It didn't bother me much. I liked the smell. It made everything feel clean and orderly. C block was where the worst off were kept, the ones that had the highest propensity for violence. The majority of the patients were criminals, or people who had had a complete break from reality and posed a threat to themselves or others, sometimes both. There were 12 cells, 11 occupied by patients, 2 of which were prone to catatonic states. Before coming to C block, I didn't know there was a difference between comatose and catatonic. I was doing my usual checks. My first stop was almost always George. I walked up to his window and peered in. George was in his 50s, and his states could last for days at a time, but he was awake for the time being. I tapped gently on the glass, and George looked up from his drawing and smiled.
"Deputy Hayford,"
he said, and nodded.
"Sorry about the light. I just woke up this morning, and I'm afraid more sleep may be out of the question tonight."
I shrugged. I wasn't going to hassle you about it. What are you working on? George picked up the drawing and laid it flat against the glass.
"I had a dream while I was away,"
he said.
"The hunt continued."
When he would wake, he would talk about the hunt. Said it was like some dream place he went to while he had one of his spells. Then he'd draw pictures, trying to capture whatever he'd seen on paper. What kind of traps could take down a large predator, where to shoot to incapacitate a deer, things like that. He once made a drawing of a trap that would behead a giraffe. I don't hunt, and I've never seen a giraffe outside of a zoo, but it looked like it could actually work. The newest drawing showed what looked like a man, but reminded me of a beast. His expression was feral and filled with teeth. I nodded to him. "Looks good."
"He's a hunter,"
George said gleefully, then dropped his voice near a whisper.
"But also prey."
I returned his smile, mine not nearly as wide, and walked on to Davy's cell. And Davy's states would last for weeks, but he was never unresponsive. Davy suffered from echoproxia, a fancy way of saying he had a bad habit of copying people's movements. I know that's simplifying it, but I'm no doctor. I always felt bad for him. He was only 19 years old. If you were to walk by his room, he would watch you from the window, and chances were he'd mimic whatever you were doing. If you waved, he waved. If you scratched your chin, he scratched his chin. You get the idea. When he wasn't in one of his states, he was mostly normal. Mostly. That kid loved comic books, sci-fi, fantasy. I would bring him books, and he would speed through them. After a few years, we were friends. Well, as much as we could be, given our situation. So, yeah. Anyway, it was a slow night. After I finished my rounds, I went back to the security office, where I spent most of my time watching the monitors. 2 cameras on each end of the hall, and 1 in each room. The light above the east exit went red, meaning someone was outside. The monitor showed Officer Jennings, Steve when we weren't around patients, standing with the man in restraints. As I watched, He picked up the landline phone from the cradle beside the door. I answered my phone before the second ring. "Steve, what's happening?" I said, looking at the restrained man. "I wasn't expecting the new guest this late." Steve looked up to the camera as he spoke, his slick hair shining in the light of the hall.
"Yeah, sorry about that, Carl. This one had to be kept under the radar. If the press got wind of it, it would have made for a much tougher trip over here, not to mention the death threats."
The mention of the press unnerved me. I pressed a button to pan the camera to the far end of the hall. There stood 4 more guards, weapons drawn, and at the low ready. "Jesus Christ, Steve, who is that?"
"Have you been living under a rock?"
Steve asked.
"Well, let's get 'em inside, and then we'll talk."
I left the office and walked to the door, picking up my keys on the way. 2 key turns and the press of a button later, I was standing face to face with a beast. The man was bald, with scars crisscrossing over his scalp, and a patchy beard on his face. Normal enough, but his eyes were just blank. No light, no humanity. That's as close as I can explain. Steve waved the other guards in behind them.
"Where do you want 'em, Carl?"
I pointed to the cell across from Davy. It had been empty the longest. Steve led the man in and removed the restraints. The man went over to the bed and sat, staring ahead at a blank wall.
"Thank God that's over,"
Steve said.
"Come on, we'll talk in your office."
We went in and I shut the door behind us, leaving the guards in the hall. "What is going on here, Steve? It's damn near 2200 and you're bringing me a surprise guest that needs that many guards?" He sat down in my chair, hard, causing the springs to squeak in protest.
I know. I'm sorry, okay? This wasn't my call. And as long as he's in a cell, he's fine. Besides, did you see his eyes? He's sedated, and he won't be causing any trouble for at least 8 hours.
"Well, who the hell is he?" Steve raised an eyebrow at me, incredulous.
You seriously don't recognize him?
"If I knew, then I wouldn't have asked."
That,
he pointed to the man's image on the screen,
is Titus Corso, who the media in their infinite empathy dubbed Killer Counselor.
The name hit me like a hammer. Corso used to be a family counselor and had killed 2 entire families. A grand total of 2 men, 2 women, and 7 children. "Christ," I said.
He would separate the mother from the father,
Steve said,
and put them in different rooms, each with 1 or 2 of the kids. He would then convince each of the parents that the other would be let go, children included, if they would kill the children in the room with them.
I remembered. "Yeah," I said. The father would kill the children, then be shown into the other room where the mother had killed the other children, neither of them knowing. Both cases ended with the father killing the mother, and then himself. Steve laughed.
That's the very definition of fucked up right there.
"Why are you laughing?" I said, my anger rising. That thing in there needs to be put down, not hospitalized." Steve smoothed his mustache with a free hand.
I'm not arguing with that. Shit, if I could get away with it, I'd walk in there and off him myself. But this is only temporary. He's going upstate to Linwood. But we've had protesters along the route. Grandparents swearing vengeance. Media vultures hovering overhead. We just needed somewhere to stash him for the night and get the route clear. He doesn't get the luxury of being lynched. He's going into general population at Linwood. Hopefully a bigger animal will kill him slowly and save us some tax dollars.
I took a couple of deep breaths, trying to calm myself. "How long till he's gone?"
Tomorrow morning,
Steve said.
7 sharp. I'll call you from the hotel when I'm heading this way.
I looked at the monitor showing Corso's room. He just sat there, staring ahead. I turned back to Steve. Make sure you are. I don't want him here any longer than he has to be. An hour passed, and Corso hadn't moved at all. I walked the hall, holding my notepad and filling out the nightly log. As I passed Davy's cell, he approached his window, miming me, holding an imaginary notepad of his own. I smiled and nodded, knowing it didn't mean anything to him right then. I turned to the opposite side and looked in on George. He was showering, his bathroom curtain closed and steam rising to the ceiling. I was about to go on my way until I noticed the shadows. There were 2 shadows behind the curtain. One was obviously George, who had managed to keep his belly even after years of confinement. The other was a much larger man standing behind him. I immediately pounded on the window as I got my keys out with my other hand. By the time I turned my key and punched in my code, George had opened the curtain. He stood there staring at me, wrapped in a towel and dripping onto the floor.
Deputy Hayford?
He asked, color rising in his cheeks.
What is going on?
I swung the door open hard enough for it to thump against the wall. My hand was on the butt of my pistol, ready.
Where is he?
I asked, trying to remain calm.
There was someone else in here. Where is he?
He shook his head.
There's no one else here,
he said.
I've been told I'm crazy, but I'm not blind.
I walked around him and pulled the curtain all the way back, bunching it up against the wall. Nothing. It didn't make any sense. I knew what I had seen. George must have noticed my expression.
Don't worry, Deputy. Hallucinations happen to the best of us,
he said. I averted my eyes from him. No, I guess it was my mistake. I thought, well, I don't know what I thought. I'll get out of here, let you get back to what you were doing. I could feel him watching me as I left in a daze. As I walked back to my office, I passed Corso's room. He was staring at me, his brow furrowed in anger, but his mouth showed a wide smile. He got up from his bed and hurriedly walked to the window, where he stood, looking me in the eyes.
You interrupted my fun,
he said. His voice sounded like his throat was full of gravel.
Can a person have a little me time without having an armed guard pounded on the door?
What he was insinuating was absurd. That he was somehow able to, I don't know. Get away from the window, I said, as calmly as I could. Corso smiled wider and headbutted the glass. It shook in its frame, and a red welt immediately appeared on his forehead. I pointed my finger at his face. Stop. Stop it now, or you'll be cuffed again. He slammed his head forward again. Blood splashed across the glass.
I can do this all day,
Corso said, looking past me and over my shoulder.
But I don't know how much he can take.
I turned to see Davy standing there at his own window, blood pouring down his face. He rammed the glass once more before I could stop him. Davy, no! I screamed, but he was in a state and paid no attention to me. I ran to his door, fumbling for my keys. Corso struck the glass again, and Davy echoed the movement. The pen pad shook as I slammed down on the buttons. Their heads collided with the glass once more in unison. I threw the door open just as Davy collapsed. His head struck the floor with a sickening thud, and I slid the last few feet on my knees. With a quick pull on his shirt, I turned him on his side so he wouldn't choke on his blood. He began to convulse. As I tried in vain to keep him steady, I grabbed my radio and thumbed the button. This is Deputy Carl Hayford, C Block. I need emergency medical personnel down here now. A sing-song voice came through the speaker.
Little baby in the dark house, you have seen the sun rise. Why are you crying? Why are you screaming? You have disturbed the house guard.
Davy was still. His last breath was a blood bubble on his lips that slowly shrunk back into his mouth. I stood, then looked through the glass at Corso. I could barely make out his features through the blood. His smile disappeared and he slammed his face against the glass, smashing it like putty. There was an audible crunch as his nose broke, and fresh blood splattered across the glass as he screamed.
Who has disturbed me?
The lights went out in his room and he was gone within the dark. I drew my pistol and stepped across the hallway, aiming at Corso's window. Nearby, George spoke from behind his door.
Don't, Carl. He wants you to enter. He wants to trap you. Your prey.
My eyes didn't move from the window. Go away from the door, George. Get towards the back of your room. It'll be safer there.
Carl, listen,
George said.
Don't let him talk to you. If you see him, shoot. Don't hesitate.
As I approached Corso's door, it opened on its own. My hands shook as I slowly stepped into the shadows. And then I was in my house, not the apartment I'd been living in for the past few years, but the house I had shared with my family. Bright sunlight streamed through the windows over the kitchen sink, and everything smelled just as it always had. Fresh flowers. Jacqueline always loved fresh flowers. I could hear her in the bedroom, our bedroom, crying. Then I realized what day this was.
It was the day she left you,
Corso said. He was sitting on my old couch, blood still running from his face. I wheeled towards him and released the pistol safety.
It's so sad,
he continued,
losing a child so young.
Don't, I said. Just shut the fuck up. He grabbed one of our throw pillows and used it to wipe his face, leaving a half-clotted mess on the fabric.
You know she left because of you, right? Losing the baby was one thing, but you could have had more. But she couldn't live with you. She couldn't deal with your grief. It was stifling. She was choking on your depression like a throat full of black tar.
Get up, I screamed. Stand up! I didn't know what to say. What could I do? I didn't even know what was real. Corso picked up a picture frame from the end table and looked at it, then put it back down.
How did it feel, Carl? Watching her slip away. You wouldn't even hold her after the funeral. All wrapped up in your grief. That's when she knew. The next year was sticking around out of obligation, out of fear. Fear of what you would do to yourself.
I began to cry, crying like I hadn't in years.
Why are you crying? Making noises like a drunkard who cannot sit still on his stool. You know what to do, Carl.
I raised the pistol,
Little baby in the dark house.
Placed the barrel in my mouth.
You have seen the sunrise.
My finger was tied on the trigger. I looked to the window to look at the sunlight, to look out at the yard. What had the view been from that window? Was it the garden? I couldn't remember, so there was nothing outside of the window. I couldn't remember, so Corso couldn't know what to project there. As soon as I pulled the pistol from my mouth, he was on me, throwing me to the ground. I rolled through the threshold, then we were grappling on the floor, each of us trying to get a grip on the pistol.
Give it to me,
He screamed.
you miserable piece of shit!
Corso swiftly brought his knee up into my groin. Pain bloomed like a fire, and I was immediately sick to my stomach. He dropped like a stone, pushing his elbow into my throat until blackness creeped into the edges of my vision. Suddenly I could breathe, and his weight was off me. I turned to my side, retching and gasping, and there was George. He had pushed him off of me and had managed to get his thin hospital-issued bath towel around Corso's neck. I flailed blindly for my pistol. Corso reached behind him, grabbing and pulled him down by the arm.
I'm going to fucking kill you.
He hissed.
I'm going to tear at you with my teeth. I am the house god.
His hiss turned into a scream as George shoved his thumb into Corso's eye, his thumbnail popping it like a grape. Relief washed over me as I grabbed the pistol and quickly aimed at Corso. He reared back and away from George, his hand going up to his ruined eye. I fired over and over again, the shots deafening in the corridor. Corso looked down at his wounds, then at me. He smiled, slumped against the wall, and died. Every breath was fire. My balls ached terribly. I looked at George, standing tall and now completely naked, his body spattered with blood. I tried to form words as he grabbed his towel and covered himself once more.
How?
I croaked.
How did you get out?
He asked. I nodded.
After you barged in, you left the door unlocked.
I laughed, and it hurt, but I laughed anyway.
He thought you were prey,
He said. I nodded.
I
said.
I was just lucky enough to leave the tiger's cage unlocked.
George smiled.
It felt nice to hunt,
He said. The medic showed up a couple of minutes later, and within half an hour Steve showed up, bleary-eyed and half asleep. I gave my statement, at least the parts that didn't make me look like I belonged in one of C-Block's cells. I can't explain what exactly happened or how Corso could do the things he did. Did he really convince those people to murder each other, or did he force them like he tried to force me to eat a bullet from my gun? I don't know, just like I don't know why I'm writing this out. 2 nights ago, I woke up in a sweaty tangle of sheets, singing Corso's little song. It happened again last night, and here I am putting all of this on paper, and I'm not sure if it was my idea. I think I have to because I tried to stop and couldn't. Something wants me to write this down. Wants to see its name on the page. Its lullaby spelled out for everyone to read. This whole time, I've been fascinated and afraid of Corso, but I don't think that's who I should have worried about. I've disturbed the house god, and Lord help me, I don't know what to do now.
You have disturbed the house god.
On what would have been our 50th anniversary, I bought you a marble headstone. Stone is the recommended gift for 90 years of marriage, but my being around another 40 is a gamble for which the odds are too long. Gold is the traditional gift for 50 years together, but you've no use for a gold necklace or earrings. I walked across the cemetery, still not entirely sure how to explain my recent purchase. You've been gone for 12 years, and though I've visited your grave each April, I never felt the need to mark the occasion with a headstone before. It must be the sentimentality that comes with getting older. That and the fact that you've been on my mind constantly over the last few weeks. A particularly sweet-smelling book, or the feel of dry or warmed sheets against my face, and you're there in the room with me, close and yet maddeningly out of reach. As our 50th anniversary drew near, a poignant reminder of the time I've spent alone, memories of you were as abundant as the pollen coating the deck rails and windowsills in spring. Grief is an unending process, a lengthy decay of the weight-bearing pillars of our soul, and my grief for you has been as complex as the most baroque of architectures. I thought picking out a headstone would provide some measure of closure. Instead, it has triggered that decay to progress with a newfound flourish. The cemetery where you're buried is empty of other visitors. A light breeze disturbs the boughs of a nearby copse of pines. As I approach the spot, now marked with a glittering black marble marker, memories, pleasant, bitter, and otherwise, swirl through my brain like frantic birds. Hi, I say as I kneel, because it feels strange not to say anything. I run a finger along the numbers depicting the 2 short years of your life. The grass around the marker is patchy and uneven. The groundskeeper must have realized his blunder, for seeds, like oblong insects, pepper the upset dirt. Happy anniversary, I continue and gesture at the marker. If you're still around and haunting this cemetery, you're likely surprised by the addition. I suppose 50 was a number I simply couldn't ignore. There's no answer, of course. Had this been a movie, the lonely widower in an abandoned graveyard would have been answered by a murder of cawing crows. As if to punctuate its resistance to macabre cliché, the sun emerges from behind a cloud and bathes the cemetery in light. I know you always found my adherences to the rules of consumerist-driven anniversary gifts funny, I say. But there were at least a handful of years you played along, so I figured maybe you'd humor me with this one, too. I pause, thinking my next statement through before I say it, as if I'm not free to sit here and ramble all day. Everyone deserves to be remembered, I think. To not disappear as if they never existed. Even someone like you, my sweet. Even someone who's done the things you've done. I believe this is true, but the moment I speak it, I feel a glut of anxiety in my stomach. Who am I to deliver you pardon? To excuse your innumerable lies? I changed the subject. The headstone is probably the nicest gift I ever gave you. It's the most expensive, at least. Unless you count what I offered up the last time we spoke. our 20th anniversary in '91. I stop, suddenly feeling truly stupid. Why am I sitting here talking to a rock? I lean on one hand, preparing to rise, to leave whatever dirt my heels kick up where it falls. But my muscles clench before I can fully stand. There's one last question I want to pose. It's not really for you. Like I said, I'm talking to a rock. But one I need to ask myself. I think I knew the answer to it once, long ago, when your transgressions were still far in your future and even farther in mine. It's not, how could I not have known? I ask myself that one already. It isn't even, did I worry you'd plan for the same fate for me? I asked myself that one too, though it hardly mattered. A rustling sound comes from somewhere behind me. I stiffen, and this time I do climb to my feet. A young man carrying an impressive flower arrangement makes his way along a footpath. He smiles sadly at me as he passes, as if we share a secret or are joined by loss. How to convey with just a look that I do not deserve his smile? Whomever he is visiting is surely worthy of his sorrow. Whomever he grieves for could not have hurt him the way you hurt me. Easier to just return the gesture. Let him believe he understands my purpose in this place. Looking down at your marble marker, the question returns, setting my soul on fire, filling my limbs and face with heat. Before I can ask it, I need to be certain I've overlooked nothing, to go over everything again. I sink to the ground once more and lean my back against your headstone. Crossing my legs at the ankles, I close my eyes, picture our old house on Theodore Street, and let thoughts of earlier anniversaries overtake me. We have nothing but each other during our first year of marriage, so when you ask what I want for an anniversary gift, I choose something inexpensive. Cigars would be perfect, I say before planting a kiss on your lips. They qualify paper, and those little brevas are only 10 cents apiece. You twirl away from me when I try to kiss you again. Maybe you'll even smoke a few with me, I tease. That depends, you say, smiling devilishly. If you butter me up with a really wonderful gift, I could be convinced. I keep my expression inscrutable, though I know you'll adore the flowers hidden on the top shelf of the bedroom closet. I had them handcrafted from the pages of your favorite novel, Daphne du Maurier's The House on the Strand. When I do give them to you at dinner that evening, I do so without preamble or fanfare. I simply sweep them from the chair beside me and hold them under your pretty little nose. Your eyes widen in surprise, then narrow as you try to determine what it is you're seeing. Slowly, you lift your hand, take the wire stems from mine, and risk a tentative sniff. Are they made from a book? I nod and tell you which one. Your mouth falls open before curling into a smile. What a wonderful gift. I guess I'm going to have to smoke one of those cigars with you after all. As it happens, however, we make love after dinner and stay between the sheets rather than venture out onto the balcony. The cigars lie forgotten on my dresser until a blistering evening at the end of July, when I wake to the smell of smoke and find you holding one between elegant fingers on the moonlit back porch. It is midnight. You'd still been out when I'd gone to bed. One of the women from your office celebrated a birthday at a nearby bar. I can't remember the colleague's name, but I'm not the suspicious type. I've always been fine with you doing your own thing. What are you doing out here? I ask playfully. You continue staring off into the distance. The end of the cigar glows like the eye of a monster peering out from the gloss of a Hollywood screen. Celebrating, you finally say. just when I've started to wonder if something's wrong. "Oh," I respond. "Still in a festive mood after the party?" A small, strange smile spreads across your face. You pry your eyes from that distant house to look at me, and for a second, I feel like I don't know you at all. Just a job well done, nothing at all that exciting. I shrug, thinking you're drunk and waxing philosophical. "Okay then, I'm going back to bed. Good night." You say nothing in return, but in the morning when I go outside, the butt, stained with a ring of peach lipstick, lies crushed on the otherwise pristine deck. The ashes look like the remnants of a small but destructive fire, and though I can't put my finger on why, it concerns me that you've discarded it so unceremoniously, with so little regard for the mess you've made. I sweep the cigar into my hand and go back into the house. I mean to throw it into the trash, but it ends up in a box atop my bureau instead. We've been married 14 years when you casually mentioned moving. You claim it was my idea to leave Theodore Street, but that simply is not true. I smile and pat your hand. If you need a change, darling, who am I to insist otherwise? We can contact a realtor this afternoon. I say we, but I mean you, since I'm swamped with work. Besides, you're better at things like this. If we are going to move, I chime in helpfully from the doorway later. When you're on the phone with Sandy from Remax, we might as well go all out like Chicago or Milwaukee. You look at me like I'm crazy and wave me away. I hear you telling Sandy Foxborough sounds lovely, and that we'd love to check out other towns south of the city. When we leave Boston for Brockton, I'm still miffed we didn't try for something farther. What's the point of moving if you're not going to make a truly fresh start? Still, you seem buoyed by the 1.5 acres and spacious garage, and we're putting the finishing touches on the new house, laying rugs and hanging planters, when I realize our 15th anniversary is a mere 3 days away. I have to search several bookcases to find where you've shelved Emily Post's Etiquette. Chapter 22 relays that the traditional gift for the year 15 is crystal. I consider new glassware, photo frames, candlestick holders, and a crystal clock for the mantel. Ultimately, I decide that simpler is better, and choose a Waterford vase. It's in the center of the table and filled with yellow roses come April 7th, when you arrive home after a long day of work and an overdue trip to the market. You squint in confusion, then smile, but the smile turns to panic. The emotions rippling across your face like swells beneath the sea. Is today? Oh God, it is. I can't believe I forgot. I'm so sorry, Stephen. I go to you quickly and wrap you up in my arms. No need to apologize. All is forgiven. I know how busy you've been lately, how much the new job has taken out of you. The only thing I want this year is for you to be happy. Maybe once things settle down, we can take a vacation together. When you pull away, there are tears in your eyes. Oh, Steve, you really mean it? That would be wonderful. I know I said I was okay with moving, but it's been hard to get situated. You're with the same company and travel so much for work anyway, so it's been easier for you. A vacation would be such a welcome distraction. There you go again with your inexplicable insistence that it was me who wanted to move. You're emotional enough, however, so I don't point this out. You go to the table and run your fingers over the vase. It's beautiful. I really love it. And what a unique pattern. It's an extra-large, deep-cut style, I explain. It makes the vase really durable and subsequently a little heavy. If it cuts too harsh a line for you, I can take it back and get something more delicate. Oh, absolutely not. It's staying right where it is. You pause. In fact, when these roses lose their luster, I'll replace them with the paper ones from our first anniversary. I smile and give you a kiss, but this, of course, is not what happens. Life has a way of separating you from your best intentions. We never went on that vacation. We were too busy, too tired. You were right. I did travel a lot for work, and when I was home, we never really mustered up the motivation to go away. The vase made its way from the table to a kitchen cabinet, and from there to the floor of a crowded hallway closet. That's why I was surprised when, approximately 10 months later, I saw a glimmer that turned out to be a Waterford vase beneath the bathroom sink. Wondering if you knocked it over in the closet and stowed it here to hide a crack, I hold it up for inspection. The vase is indeed splintered down the center, but it's hard to make out the extent of the damage due to the square-cut pattern. I draw the vase closer, trying to determine if there is colored light refracting from the glass, or is that blood caught in the zigzag fractures and the grooves between the squares? Startled, I almost dropped the heavy glass piece, but managed to steady it with my left hand. As I peel my right hand from its base, several strands of hair, the ends matted with bits of flesh, come away with my clammy fingers. And yet, I say nothing to you about the vase. The next time I look for it, it's gone. I think about it in relation to other gifts I gave you, the cotton sheets you threw away, claiming you must have stained them with your period, leather gloves that looked to have gone through war, lace lingerie that disappeared from dresser drawers, and silver knives from kitchen cabinets. I spend the next 5 years making excuses for your behavior, until the truth is discovered, like a corpse beneath a cover of leaves, and there are no more excuses that can be made to fit. At noon on our 20th anniversary, the door to the courthouse slams shut behind me. The mass of reporters outside is like nothing I've ever seen. "This way, Mr. Gardner." Your lawyer waves at me from the other side of the metal detector. I place my wedding ring and keys in a basket and step through. "How are you today?" he asks as I follow him down the corridor. Is this a serious question? I mumble that I'm fine. We go up a flight of stairs and down another corridor, stopping outside the doors of a room far removed from any hubbub. "I understand you wish to speak to Marisol alone, but given the charges, you must understand that we cannot grant you your request. There are officers stationed at the end of the hallway." He gestures, and I see the men, beefy as professional wrestlers, and as head of Marisol's legal team, he continues, "I'll be in the room the entire time. I trust you'll be able to carry out whatever business you have, with her in my presence." I stare at him blankly. Whatever business I have with you. Does this imbecile realize I'm your husband of 2 decades? I understand you'll be in the room. I trust, however, that you will allow us to converse without unnecessary interference. The lawyer sighs and gestures toward the door, as if he's already regretting this arrangement. I push it open and step inside. My jaw drops when I see you. You're sitting at the far end of a large conference table, your dark brown hair pulled in a bun. Your face is drawn and extremely pale. Your lips are dry and bloodless. You're wearing a bright orange jumpsuit like something out of a crime drama, and your hands are shackled together and folded in your lap. "Hi," I say as I sit, because it feels strange not to say anything. You stare at me, your face a mask of hatred that I just can't understand. Forgive me for saying so, but you don't look well. Are you eating what they're providing? You don't answer, but your mouth grows more pinched, as if you've swallowed something rank. "This isn't my fault, you know," I say quietly, trying to sound understanding. I've been as supportive as possible, even now, and I never gave the police anything on you. Your green eyes narrow as your mouth moves, but I can't hear the words you've spoken. What was that? I asked, leaning forward, cursing the length of the table. The only two chairs have been positioned as far away from one another as possible. I said, it is your fault. We both know that, though there's no point in saying so now. I frown and place both hands on the table, struggling to quell the trembling. Honey, I know you feel like everyone's turned on you, but staying angry at me will get you nowhere. I can't help that police isolated cells from a cigar near one of the victims that matched your DNA. There were driver's licenses taped to the insides of the pottery I got you for our 9th anniversary, and victims' teeth wrapped in the wool scarf I gave you for our 7th. I had to let them search the house. You know they had a warrant. I even hid the Waterford vase, wanting to help you any way I could. Yes, you did hide it, in my hope chest. How very helpful of you, darling. Your voice is spiked with bitterness, but also a splash of resignation. You know there's no way around the evidence that ensnares you. I love you, I say. I've always loved you, and I've only ever tried to support you. You wanted to move, I agreed to move. I had no idea you were putting distance between yourself and your crimes. I traveled for work and gave you your space. I never asked questions. I bought you a gift for every anniversary, something thoughtful I believed you'd like. You seem as if you want to speak. There's something like outrage on your face, but you can't hold on to your indignation, and your features reclaim their defeated air. Hurry through here, Stephen. I'd like to be taken back to jail. You pause, curiosity suddenly transforming your face, turning you into the woman I married. Why did you want to see me in the first place? It's a reasonable question, but I have a good answer for why I wanted to visit you in this depressing place. I stand and step toward you, then look back at the lawyer, but he's immersed in the contents of a file. As I walk toward you, I slip a wedding ring off my finger. Without it, my hand feels unfinished, an amorphous alien thing. When I reach your chair, I hold it out with a wistful smile, remembering when I first donned it. An incredulous laugh escapes your lips, and I realize you think I'm asking you for a divorce. No, I say. Hurt you'd think I'd ever abandoned you, let alone in your time of need. I'm giving you this as a reminder of my love, your platinum anniversary gift. You pull your handcuffed wrists closer to your chest. I don't need your ring, but I want you to have it. The etiquette book practically demands it, and it's bad luck to break the tradition. I reach out, grab your hand, and slip the ring onto your thumb. It's a little loose, but I trust it won't fall off. You stand so abruptly you upset your chair. We're done here, you tell your lawyer. He looks up, startled, and nods. Despite your brusqueness, you don't look at the ring or move to take it off your finger. A wave of satisfaction washes over me. Your lawyer picks up the phone from the desk against the wall. A moment later, the officers from the hallway come to escort you through the courthouse. I imagine you exiting out the back, avoiding reporters and victims' families, to a windowless van marked prisoner transport, idling beside the curb. But your departure from the room marks the occasion of the last time I ever saw you. The last time I gazed upon a face I regarded almost every day for 20 years. Of course, I see you frequently on television and in newspapers, your downcast eyes and perpetually slumped shoulders plastered beneath the gruesome headlines. Epicene eviscerator, monoclonous murderer, and vicious vixen are names with which the media alternately christens you, due to the ruthless nature of your crimes and your indiscriminate method of selecting victims. The name that sticks, however, is one I can't help but be fond of, for it encompasses your relation with me within its otherwise brutal connotations. While every anniversary card you ever gave me was signed, "Your loving Marisol," even I started to think of you as the Butcher Bride of Boston. I shift where I sit, my back aching against the marble. The sun has sunk considerably, and the cemetery is steeped in lengthening shadows. Groaning, I sit forward, turn onto my knees, and attempt to commit to memory the image of your headstone, framed by rows of other monuments. It will likely be the last time I ever look upon the scene. Massachusetts had not had the death penalty since 1947, but your cancer was as fatal as any electrocution or injection. When the news broke that you died, media outlets ran an endless parade of features, rehashing the details of your crimes for a new generation of consumers. My phone number has been unlisted, my identity obscured for so long that I didn't have to worry about reporters calling or sending emails. There's nothing new to say anyway, or perhaps nothing I'd want to share with them. No one's curiosity warrants my pain. No one else deserves our secrets. The young man whom I saw earlier passes again, having concluded his visit with the dearly departed, arms empty of vibrant flowers. It's another reminder of the approaching evening, and that I've come here for a purpose. Another reminder of duties beyond those of your grief-stricken, loving husband. The request for cigars, the blood-stained sheets, the leather gloves I returned to your Accord's compartment time and time again. The crystal vase I stashed in a blackout, only to be given the opportunity to hide it again. The platinum wedding ring belonging to one of my victims that so resembled my own, a ring that I placed, like a nail in a coffin, upon your elegant, restrained hand. All of it forms the answer to a question I'd known I'd pose again. Would there come a time in which I'd be permitted to return to my old ways? Satisfied that the answer is yes, and that the time for it is now, I bow my head, in case you're still around and haunting this cemetery, and bid you fond farewell. Enjoy your last anniversary gift, I say, feeling sentimental all over again. And I hope you won't forget the other presents. I put so much thought into every one.
One. My mom told me about Dad's quirky habit of sleeping under the bed when he was young. My dad was a tough cookie, so hearing such a thing about him made it hard to believe. I guess his father had been in the Navy. Mom said sometimes his father came home and tried to use him as a punching bag. I guess that saying of the nut not falling too far from the tree is sometimes a fact. My dad seemed to grow right into the mold his dad made for him. He liked to drink vodka like Grandpa, and when he did, he'd sometimes get nasty with his attitude. Short-fused and vocal, sometimes physical. Mom said he wasn't that way before he went to Vietnam. She said that hellhole ruined a lot of good husbands, if they were lucky enough to even make it back home. Anyway, I guess my dad's safety zone from his father when he was a kid was under the bed. Most kids, like me, were scared as hell of what kind of monsters lived under our beds once the lights went out. My dad took refuge there. I felt a weird kind of smile stretch through my lips with the thought. Life can have a way of turning one's feelings about a parent from outright wonder and fear to a downright sorrow-filled compassion. I thought I'd never forgive my dad for some of the whoopings I got from him, but now that he's old and fragile, I see things differently. He looks at me now, and I'm not really sure he's even still in there. His eyes seem to tell me there is a faint memory of who I am, or was. I remember on occasional nights my mom would come in and warn my brother and I not to argue with Dad. She'd have that look of concern in her eye as she quietly walked over to the bunk beds we slept. Mine was the top, because Johnny was older. He wasn't as scared of the dark side underneath as I was. Anyway, Mom would stand beside the bed and whisper to us, "If your father comes in, keep your eyes closed and pretend you're already asleep. He's spoiling for trouble tonight. Don't give it to him." "You gonna be all right, Mom?" Johnny asked in a hushed whisper. "'Cause I'll stay up and protect you." "I'll be okay, Johnny. Just go to sleep and ignore anything you hear. I'll wake you up in the morning. It'll all be okay, I promise." Johnny and I went to bed many nights to those words of concerned warning from our mom. Too many nights we heard arguments and sounds of struggle downstairs in the living room and kitchen beneath us, underneath our beds. My brother would try and make me feel better when he'd hear my sniffles from under my blankets. Sniffles brought on by tears that were caused by our dad's demons left over from the war mixing with his glass of clear liquid he called not water. One time I asked how come he changed so much when he was drinking water. "It don't do that to me and Johnny," I'd asked. My dad looked up at me with a blank stare that scared the hell out of us. I think back now, and what I saw behind his eyes were the leftover fears from the North Viet Cong. I see movies now, and I wonder how in the hell he lived through that. But after his eyes followed down his arm to the glass he was holding, he looked back at me and said only 3 words. "It's not water." And from that day on, that's what Johnny and I called the poison he poured down his throat for what seemed as fast as he could. The nights when he didn't drink not water became fewer and fewer. Fun Saturdays at the zoo or lazy Sundays in the park throwing a ball faded into nothingness. There were plenty of nights that didn't turn bad. I don't want to paint the picture that my dad was some broken evil devil looking to hurt us. What I saw then was different, but today what I think I looked at was a scared boy who was made to be a man too quick. I really don't think he held a mean bone in his body when he wasn't fighting his past with the bottle. I loved my dad. I feared him at times. Mostly, he was just with his punishments. Mostly. I believe Johnny would have said the same thing, if he were still alive. Unfortunately, my brother did not live long enough in this world, and I miss talking to him. I didn't do nearly enough with him when he was here. Johnny died just before the Christmas I turned 23. He was only 27. I hated Christmas for many years after the melanoma cancer stole him away from me and my family. I believe that helped feed my dad's demons too. I know it fed mine. Sometimes in this life, even at my age now, I still want to jump up high in the air to the mattress when I go to bed. It just feels like it's safer to give those damned goblins under the bed a harder target to grab. You know, if they are under there. I swear I still see 2 eyes in the dark, barely shining through the black, observing my every move. My dad is 87 years old now. He never seemed to have goblins under his bed. All his scary nasties were out here in the world of daylight, the time when everyone else feels safer. His mind is falling into the grips of dementia. He appears frailer each time I make it to see him. The man couldn't hurt a soul now, even if it were the Viet Cong war demons coming over the wire. He remembers me, though. I wish I could be more regular seeing him. Somehow the guilt eats at me for not being a better son. I, of course, tried justifying myself with thoughts like, where the hell was he when I needed help? It still hurts to watch someone grow old, especially someone you're supposed to love, but never felt like you ever knew them but surface deep. I hear now that I was his favorite between Johnny and me. Damn my mom for telling me such a thing after Johnny's gone. How could I ever live up to something like that? I'll be damned if I didn't try, though, more than once, even though he deserted me way back when I was 5. That's a story for another day. My parents divorced for reasons I later understood, but tried to explain it to a 5-year-old. He may have scared the shit out of me as a child, but he was still my dad. And then one day, he was not. He pretended to play the part for the 3 or 4 weekends he would visit and 2 weeks in the summer when Johnny and I would stay in Kansas City with him. He tried not to drink the not water then. I think Mama must have warned him not to fuck up. So I guess he loved us enough not to drink when we were with him after he moved out. 2. I didn't really want this story to turn the way of a me story, Doc. Well, Steve, how does this make you feel? Dr. Charles Strangeheart asked. You're kidding me, right? Do you educated fuckers really believe asking a lame-ass question like, how does this make me feel? Do a goddamn thing to someone with serious or even mild issues feel any better? Or is this just an academic question that is supposed to cure us all by showing us our feelings and how to just deal with them? Or maybe only used as a backup option when you're caught not knowing what the fuck you're talking about? I knew my vein had to be bulging from my left side temple. It always swelled first, and then came the splotchy red and white skin. You pay thousands upon thousands of dollars to be schooled in all the most technically advanced therapies, and all your types rebound to, how does this make you feel? Well, isn't that freaking phenomenal? Damn. I guess this proves the nuts don't fall too far from the tree, even if they don't share the experience of a devastating war between them. I'm sorry, Doc. It's just that I got job pressures. My dad is dying right in front of me when I make myself go see him. His wife is a manipulative bulldog who lies to me constantly. I love my dad, but she's stolen him from me for years now, and I can't deal with it. I suddenly felt totally overwhelmed and fatigued. And that is how it makes me feel. There you go. I answered the goddamn question. Now, cure me. Steve, I have to say, those outbursts are not necessarily a bad thing. Under controlled circumstances. Surroundings like here with me in the office, letting off some steam without scaring the hell out of any civilians out there. Doc Charles pointed his finger to the window, where I could see people walking down the sidewalk of downtown Union City. You don't want to scare the masses, especially in this age of times. Doc smiled. I think we're making progress, though, and I hate to ask this, but... He winked at me. How does that statement make you feel? You got me, Doc, but seriously, I feel better. Feels like a few less monsters under the bed today. I won't have to jump as high tonight when I hit the bed. I laughed. I have to admit, the highball glass filled with a double shot of George Dickel fine Kentucky bourbon helped nurse me back into a more satisfactory state of mind. Yes, I had made strides towards feeling better about life and myself tonight, but I wasn't instantly cured. There were still rough edges to be honed down, and bourbon did that for me at times. I didn't abuse it. It wasn't like my father and his not water. I relaxed and sipped as I let my head softly fall to the back of my recliner. My eyes quickly felt heavy. 3. The atmosphere was thick and foggy. The moon shined almost full through the window. I reached out to touch his face. He was hollow and frail. His silver and white hair now matched the color of his mother's, or at least the way I remember her. She lived to be 100. This felt terrible, but as I looked over at my father, I didn't wish the same lifespan for him. Not in the shape he was in, mentally. I imagined the hell it would be like not ever knowing exactly what was going on around me, not fully recognizing the people in my life, or being bullied by a woman who surely thought she was doing the right thing, but obviously was mistaken. I blamed her for my father's memory loss in some ways. She never let him finish a sentence. Ever. I'd ask a question, and before he could answer it, she'd be hollering the corrected answer from the other room. Always. The only time my father could speak uninterrupted by her was when he prayed, for dinner or men's Bible study or church. She didn't interrupt him then, but the minute he was finished, she was back on bulldog patrol. She was a difficult person to care for. There were many times I felt the pull of my hands to her throat. I had always enjoyed the few times my dad told her to, "Let me finish my damn thought." It was jubilance I felt every damn time it happened, even if seldom and far between. I hold a bit of self-pride when I look back at my life and think how few grudges with people I still hold. There is one I'm currently guilty for, and that's my dad's second wife. I call her She-Who. She whose name I will never speak. That grudge will never go away. I don't feel the guilt very long when it questions me. She-Who always fills in the blanks with her coy behind-your-back comments. Usually right after the caramel sugar-coated compliments she drizzles over you like an endless bottle of sickening sweet syrup. God help her if my father passes first. My dad's eyes begin to haunt me again. He reminds me of the pictures I've seen of Howard Hughes in the days he was living locked up in his high-rise apartment during his crazy hermit days. Hair wild and uncombed, beard growing out in every direction with no attempts of calming it. You'd think his damned loving wife would help him, but she is probably too busy shoving banana cream custard pies down her diabetic throat. I knew my thoughts resonated with ugly overtones. I was making progress, but I'm not perfected yet. She just may be the one stumbling block I may never overcome. My blood boils at the thought of her taking up space residing in my head. I stirred a moment and felt myself turn from one side to the other of my empty bed. I swore I heard something. It was like a faint, eerie cry. I listened again, more closely. Was I still asleep? And was this part of the dream? Or had I actually been awoken to a monster's cry? I lay in silence, straining my ears to block out the city noise of cars and sirens to focus on something closer. It almost felt like a faint, muffled whimpering very near. I heard it again. Was it coming from under the bed? Dare I lean over the edge and peek? At damn near 60 years old, I felt foolish to be nervous at the thought of looking under my own damned bed. The only monster I would find was a stinky old pair of Converse tennis shoes that had been missing since 2014, or, God forbid, an old pair of underwear that went MIA. I began to twist over on my stomach, laying sideways on the lonely king-sized bed, nervously beginning to crane my head over the edge. The old lacy, frilly thing my wife put on our bed so long ago was still hanging over the mattress edge. She left me years ago because of my issues. I'd finally gone to the psychologist like she asked, Dr. Charles. But she left me anyway. She forgot to take the damn doily quilt with her, though. It was yellowed and as stained as our marriage ended up being. But I couldn't seem to rid myself of the memories it now held. I began to pull it upwards, so I wouldn't have to lean down as much. 4. I'm sure every family throughout the world has some form of dysfunction that lives within the unit somewhere, either close inside like at the core, or some brother-in-law or distant uncle, somewhere in the family fabric. I know in the interior of our family, some of my step-siblings, even though I've never personally felt like a step or thought of them as one, that their feelings may differ. It's all about perspective. One's prize is another's goose egg. One's happiness or contentment may be the other's hell. But I've always tried to find the positive note, the silver lining wrapped up in the dark storm cloud. No life is perfect. The one I remember as a young child with my birth father, or the man after, that entered my mom's life. It was a new situation we all found each other in. Parents' new romance and marriage. 7 of us thrust into an instant family. 5 children became confused collateral damage from our parents' love. The new man brought himself and 3 new young kids, my new brothers, when I was very happy and settled with just one and my mother. I always felt they were the lucky ones to gain older brothers and the best damned mother in the world. I accepted, I shared. My older brother Johnny resented and rebelled. I saw very covertly to myself at many times throughout our entire sharing of a home that we, my mom and brother, were the ones who made any sacrifice, if one was actually to be tallied as made. I later found out while I basically settled into what I saw as a happy family, some of my siblings did not see things the same as time passed. Shit, Doc, no one will ever see your notes you're taking, will they? This would be a fucking shocker to my family if they ever found out what was in my head all these years. Steve, your secrets are safe with me, unless I surmise you're planning someone's demise. I'm a lover, Doc, not a killer. I couldn't even shoot a deer when my stepdad took me hunting. I'm safe, remember? I took that mental test, you know? The one you told me I was so normal that you couldn't believe it. I was actually feeling like Doc Charlie might be helping me. I'm finding out that I am normal. I am the sane one. I just hope I don't follow the way of my dad. I don't want to be lost inside my own mind, unable to claw my way out. My dad's recent line, which he seems stuck on, is, "Lately, I don't know my ass from a hole in the ground." He says it over and over and smiles with a chuckle. I guess in some strange way, he derives pleasure from letting it roll off his tongue. He's not the man I barely knew before the dementia took over. This is who he is now. I suppose I don't really know this man any better than I did the other. And somehow, I love him. I won't ever really know him, but I do love him. It's not just the shared blood thing either. That's never been of importance to me. Family is love and backing one another, helping each other through struggles. Crazy thought, since I really don't remember a single time when my father was actually ever there to do just that. My stepdad was, multiple times, even though we mixed like oil and water throughout and to this day still. There were many times when I felt like my stepdad suffered from the "he's not from my blood" syndrome. He was still always there for me. I love him too. I love my entire family. I get mad as hell at each of them, but I love them. You're cured. Doc smiled with the biggest grin I'd ever seen him wear in the 3 years I'd been visiting him after my wife left. I, of course, knew he was being facetious, but it felt good hearing the words. It was like a lead brick being lifted from each shoulder. Instant relief. And I drove home with a new attitude. The world was suddenly mine again. I drove home with a new attitude. I hoped this time the feeling would stick. 5. The phone was ringing before I got the door open. I raced to it, picking it up to a dial tone. The caller ID told me it was my dad's neighbor. I dreaded calling back. Frank never brought good news. I felt my new attitude begin its falter. I hit redial. "Frank." I began to shake my head. "Is he okay? Does he realize what happened to her?" It seems the bulldog was gone. Not like she had cleared out her belongings and left. Her body was still there, on the floor. The odor that filled the room reminded me of the venom she'd been capable of delivering. It hung over me as a bad memory. My dad had apparently tripped over her and fell at some point. He had been lying on the floor beside her for hours. He had hollered my name, and hers, until becoming too hoarse to speak. "I'll be right there, Frank. Thanks for being the good neighbor you've been." I realized instantly in this time of aging that life truly is very short. One should enjoy the happy moments they are allowed to the very fullest. Those are the moments that seem to fill one's entire world when young and unaware of what time is doing to you in the background, wearing you down slowly, pilfering bits and pieces, minute seconds of time and the blur of all the magnificence happening in the foreground. Now, watching someone else who already enjoyed their time on this world, reaping the nanoseconds of richness and memory making, begin the process of regressing back to the child we all came from, knowing nothing but what we see in front of us, no benefit of realizing the consequences of what the seasons of life led to. Watching life fade away, but not knowing what to do even if we realized the revolution we were made to endure. We all become ghosts of our past, born to haunt us with memories of the best of times, dangling them in front of us to taunt what we once held and took for granted. Those reflections of our past joy become the poisons that cause our pain as we see the fading of our loved ones. Our stories come to a close, leisurely at first, and then like a speeding train, rushing head-on with its bright light shining with the fury of an attacking mountain lion with no fear, no relent. My mind wouldn't let these thoughts escape as I made my way over to the house that had been lost to them both recently. Taxes, insurance, utilities, nothing had been paid. His wife just decided one day she needn't take care of those things anymore. My dad, unaware of the life nearly stolen from him by negligence. The bulldog never told him, never told me. I had to hear it from the neighbor she called her enemy now that she had been exposed. The loving neighbor that told me just in the nick of time so I could find a way to pay the 3 years of back taxes before the house was taken with all its contents, them thrown to the street. And now as I wrestle with all of this, knowing my father is helpless in the realization his world is very different suddenly, not even knowing why his wife is lying motionless on the floor, not understanding why he had been made to lie beside her for God knows how many hours, wondering what he was supposed to do. All I could think and filter out of this mess of bullshit rushing around my mind was the domineering, all self-knowing bitch was gone. I couldn't find any sorrow or even satisfaction in the fact. Life was now changed, not only for my dad, but for me. Where would he go? What would I do? I'd never taken care of anyone in the shape he was in. I didn't know what channels to go through all the bureaucracy to get assistance for someone left penniless in this world. The taxes I paid had emptied a good portion of my retirement, the economical collapse having taken most of it to begin with. I suddenly saw the foreshadow of my future. His mirrored mine in some ways. The thought scared me back to the current situation. The house couldn't be sold while the bitch was alive because my father's name was on the title and he wasn't mentally capable of signing if it sold. My name was taken off by the bulldog years before because she got mad at me. I was fucked right alongside my dad. My future every bit as devastated. I'd never be able to retire, and now all I could think of as I pulled into the drive, flashing lights of police and medical care, was he would need to come home with me, at least until I could sort things out. Life exploded in what now felt like a nanosecond, the truth being that this train wreck had been set on its course of destructive mayhem months, if not years, earlier. It was either kept from me, or I chose to ignore it. The blame held no value now. Life would be very different. My ghosts from the past now surrounded me. A man I had feared, a man whom I felt deserted me and our family, only to disappear into several other people's lives throughout his life, was now sitting in my passenger seat with a blank empty stare and the silence of a planet millions of light years away. He would be dependent on me for everything in his life now. As scared as this thought was to me, I couldn't imagine what it was to him. I glanced over, trying to smile with an assuring and pleasant loving facade across my face. In reality, the draw to push the pedal to the floor and then steer into a telephone pole, making both of our lives end without suffering through the rest, took all the self-control I could muster. 6. The whimper grew louder as I lay in bed. The sheets now lay twisted in a ball beside me, my eyes wearily trying to focus on the darkness under the bed. Everything in my recent past was being relived most every night in the form of dreams and nightmares. I never knew when I woke up if life was real in the moment or in the terror of dream world. What did I do so terrible in life, back in my youth-filled magic times, to deserve the outcome I was now living? Was God angry and punishing me? Why, at my ripe old age now, were the monsters under the bed coming back to terrify me? I was supposed to be on my way to retirement, and looking forward to my golden years. But here I was, working my ass off during the day. A small apartment I now shared with a man I barely knew who had been under the thumb of his fourth wife for the last 30 years. She had robbed him of his mental capacity and didn't even have the decency, even though she was several years younger, to stay and finish her goddamn job of taking care of the man she stole from me all those years ago. She should be here, not me. I'm laying in a bed alone because my ex-wife was smart enough to read the writing on the wall. I'm hearing noises and feeling... Fuck, I don't know what I'm feeling. Self-pity? Guilt? Anger? Nah, it's fear right now. I don't know where my life is going. My doctor told me I was cured. Bullshit. What the hell did he know? How does that make you feel? I know how the hell I feel, Doc. I feel betrayed by life. My good moments haven't stacked up against the shit dealt to me. Wonder if God was even listening. Was this entertainment for him? Like when I turned the channel over to reruns of Cheers to help knock the edge off my day? I suddenly just felt anger beyond belief run through me. What the fuck? If it's a monster under this damned... I hope it rips my head off the moment I see it. You hear me, monster? This is my home. This is my bed. My fucking rules. Show me your face and rip mine off. With that, I plunged my head down quickly below the yellowed lace, which still remained attached to the blanket I'd never been able to remove. Every time I'd tried, I'd stopped. Most all of the pleasant memories I still retained were made either on top of it or underneath it with the woman who now shared another man's bed. I had nothing to care enough to live for anymore. A monster wasn't going to scare me. Hell, I relished the thought of it taking me from this eternity of dilemma. Hanging upside down now from the edge of my bed, I slowly opened my eyes when I'd realized the monster hadn't removed my head as I had challenged. There in the furthest corner of the darkest darkness I had ever seen, I saw them. At first I held no idea who they belonged to. They had to be the devils. But then I realized they didn't hold any violence or cruel hatred within them. The eyes that stared back into mine didn't blink or so much as flicker with movement. No, these eyes held something very different, otherworldly. The two barely visible white circles surrounding a strange pair of reddish-brown irises encircling their black pupils were filled with nothing but question and mystery, with doubt. But all of a sudden they became warm in appearance, heated with a feeling of overwhelm, as if something magical just cut through the darkness. That's when I knew who owned those hard-to-read optical orbs. The pressure valve inside my brain gave a little relief inside as my eyes connected with those begging to see the same relief in mine. They belonged to my father. This was his safe zone, I remembered. He had carried the look of fear, a fear so deep I'd never seen. He had worn the look of a young man who witnessed killing of men who looked scary to American soldiers such as he, who were dropped into their jungles, taken like others from school and girlfriends, best friends and family, dropped into the middle of a quagmire not caused by the young men sent to settle by force. I think something hit him when he looked back into the same eyes filled with emotion. Something clicked, because that scared and petrified gaze from the darkness became beams of hope that he would be saved. My heart warmed and I didn't know why. Tears gushed from my eyes as I dropped down onto the floor with a thud and began to belly crawl towards him. His legs and arms tucked in the fetal position, I moved slowly. Dad, it's me, Steve. You remember me, don't you? I'm your son. I watched the familiar smile grow across the man's face I never really knew other than the fact he was my father. The familiar gap in his front two teeth showed from the widened smile and became the evidence for me to know who he was. In this instant, my dad was now a man who needed me for the first time in his life. I held a choice. I could be the man who turned his back like the many times I felt that way about what he had done. Or I could be his savior. I could crawl deeper under the bed and hold him in comfort. The comfort I knew he longed for. I've been a believer of faith my entire life. My dad was at one time, early in his life, a Methodist preacher. He left the ministry for the larger portion of his life. He left me for most of his life too. At least that's the way it felt. But he came back into ministry after he retired from secular work to become a local pastor in 3 churches not far from where I and my wife and family live. He became a little closer to me, and we shared some quality times together, sailing on his yacht on the lake or sharing a men's Bible study together. Sometimes just short, mostly pointless conversations. But this time shared together didn't last very long, a mere drop in the bucket of our lives. Times we were removed from each other crept in at several points. Maybe because I'm more like him than I want to think. Maybe the bulldog was at fault. It didn't matter now. I can't answer those questions, but I know one thing. In the moment we shared within the darkness under the bed was the closest I'd ever felt to him. I was his assurance everything would be all right. He wasn't alone in this new trial. He was now like the son who needed his dad to make things feel right. We laid under the bed arm in arm for several hours before I could convince him to crawl out and into the light once again, to face the challenges set before us. We had tackled them together. I'm 78 now. I've had some difficult times, but I've enjoyed great ones too. My father has been gone now for almost 17 years. At times, it's felt fast, yet at other times it feels like quicksand holding me at a deathly slow pace. Doc Charlie once again helped me out after I lost my dad. I guess he ended up knowing more than that one stupid question every shrink always pops off. How does that make you feel? Well, now that my time is more than likely my latter days, I find myself crawling under the bed at night when I'm feeling lost and lonely. It's now become my source of comfort like it was my father's. I now realize that in most circumstances, the monsters rarely live under the bed. It's just the noises from memories past that rattle in the dark and haunt us from circumstance or choices we sometimes land in. Embrace them and meet them head on. That's when instead of scary creatures or devils, you'll find comfort in the dark shadows under the bed. I know I do. 5 years to the day, Steve's son Jake found his father passed away in the apartment he had lived since his divorce. Jake and his mother entered the apartment with the police to do a well check after failing to get phone calls returned or answers from knocking on the door. They were about to give up and mark him as a silver alert before Jake peeked underneath the lacy bedspread and into the darkness below. He was curled up in the fetal position, but held a smile frozen across his cold blue lips.
I turned to the clock on my nightstand, and through the squints of my eyes in the darkness, I saw a green 3:04 staring back at me, blinking. 3:04 a.m. Black. 3:04 a.m. Black. It was an early Thursday morning, and I was exhausted. Being an elementary school teacher, I had finished my day's hellish routine of tending to my kids' every whim. Everything about my day seemed to be a blur, a fleeting memory from long ago. From an early age, I wanted to be a teacher, spreading the good word of education to a group of eager, doe-eyed, ignorant school children, imparting them with knowledge of things they knew nothing about. It was almost a magical, transcendent thing. Despite the stress and the practically repetitive nature of it all, I loved my kids almost more than anything. Teaching was one of the last comforts since Elaine died. Since her death, I became severely depressed and fell into an abysmal state of anhedonia. I lost motivation to eat, drink, or sleep. In the days since her passing, I tried to take my mind off it, replacing it with work, my kids at school, or trying to bask in the memories of Elaine. Yet, nothing helped. I would lie awake most nights, staring into the darkness of our lonely bedroom. Even odder, I hadn't dreamed since Elaine passed. However, on that night, something unexpected happened. I closed my eyes and let out a deep sigh. My eyelids felt heavy. I could feel my body giving in to the temptress known as slumber as I slouched down and felt my frail fingers fall from the magazine I was reading. I closed my eyes, and then I saw nothing. I recoiled, my heart racing. I felt like I had been shot. That's when I noticed there was no bed below my body. I was standing upright in a mysterious colored fog, a deep green mucus-like mist. I found myself barefoot, upright in a cold, snow-like substance scattered everywhere. It felt warm, yet an odd gray color speckled with purple that disintegrated as I touched it. The air smelled of stale salt water and algae on a cold morning, like a creaky old dock. I felt a warm breeze beneath my torso and looked down, realizing I was standing in my same attire, pajama pants with no shirt. I felt an oily, sweaty matter appear on my chest. The moisture was wet and humid, disgusting, and crawled up my skin like a spider. In this place, time stood still, yet my imagination was racing. I closed my eyes as tightly as I could and pinched my forearm. I opened my eyes and again did not see my bedroom. No bed, no lamp, no dresser. There was nothing. I saw nothing, and that I was still there. I saw the same sight as before, the eerie green fog, and every inch of this place looming down on me. I was not in my familiar position on the left side of the bed. All I could do was look in bewilderment. I, a young 20-something schoolteacher, could not conjure something like this up. As odd as it sounds, my mind could not create this place out of thin air. This place was far too complex and abstract from anything I could imagine. The clouds were shapeless. I couldn't make out any outlines. The clouds were forms I had never seen before, with innumerable edges, yet curved and swirling. The sky was dark green, with streaks of red flowing throughout the overcast substance. I thought of the aurora borealis, but this aurora was not of wondrous beauty, but instead filled with fear and an intense sense of dread. I walked forward in the mysterious substance. I took a couple of steps forward, seeing the light piercing the fog. A yellow light penetrated the mist in front of me. The mist felt humid as drops of a disgusting warm liquid slid down my face like a fat, juicy insect hitting a glass window, slowly moving downward and striking my bare feet. Curiously and cautiously, I walked towards it, arms outstretched. Even in the light-pierced fog, I could not see my hands in front of me. As I exited the mist, I noticed that I was above a large cavern on a plateau. Gray and purple speckled rocks lined the nearby mountain's sides, sloped downward, protectors of the gargantuan cavern below. Below my gaze, there was a gathering of people in a clearing, at least 13. I felt almost relieved when I saw these figures in my dream because I thought this nightmare would end if I could talk to one of them. I wanted to call out to them. The group's mysterious presence seemed to beckon me. I opened my mouth to call out to them, but my words were cut short by what I saw next. The people stood in a circle, holding hands. I studied them closer, and what attributes they had shook me to my core. Their flesh was torn in chunks from their bodies, and their hair ripped from their scalps. Men and women were dressed in the same garment, an oversized, hooded crimson cloak with a mysterious gold pattern. Around them, the fog seemed to rise to the sky above them. They stood, silent and unmoving. I peered from behind the rocks to see them raise their index fingers into the air, synchronized. In an instant, multiple red glowing beams of light shot into the sky, cracking the sky open with a thunderous roar. After this event, the men began chanting in a low baritone groan that sent shivers down my spine. The language was ancient and resembled something otherworldly. Their mouths poured as they chanted creaks, groans, clicks, and guttural lyrics. Their singing never ceased, continually over and over, never stopping for so much as a breath. Their singing, or rather chanting, was almost eternal, as if they had been doing it for thousands of years. I studied the group of women closer. The women's heads were shaved, just as those of the men were. They chanted in unison. None of them missed a beat. The cluster of women's skins resembled a molded cheese, white, yellow, with a greenish hue protruding from their veins. Their pale skin looked disgusting in the lighting surrounding them. As my eyes scanned the people, what I saw broke my sanity. My heart sank into my stomach as I studied the row of women closer. On the far right was the love of my life, Elaine, standing in the same crimson attire as the others. She stood solemnly and recited with the others in the same monotone, odd language. At the mere sight of this plagued version of the love of my life, I wanted to scream and get her attention. Elaine's face was pale and emotionless, unlike her usual self. Elaine looked different than she did 6 years ago when I had last known her. Her arms were covered in strange scars and scratches. Elaine lifted her arms and continued chanting. I heard a loud, animalistic roar rise from the fog behind me as she did so, which rattled the ground beneath my feet. 1,000 knives were sharpened with a rusty tool, a dentist's shrapnel scraping up against freshly polished teeth. I felt every hair in my body stand on end at that moment. The individuals stopped chanting and they stood in silence, looking above them. My eyes focused on the sky above. The sky was no longer green, but a melancholy atrocity. The atmosphere was swirling into a color that I had never seen before. This color was beautiful, as I had never seen anything like it in any spectrum, yet terrifying for the same reasons. The color lingered in the air and the clouds dissipated. Then, black forms began to climb up the cliff. They resembled tar, slowly crawling up the rocks, slithering like snakes. As they reached the edge of the stones, they began to make their way towards me. These eyeless creatures, lifeless forms, were sentient. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. They moved like vines, seeping into every crevice of the rocky surface and consuming them. I wanted this to stop. This was a dream and nothing more. I tried to wake up. My mind began to race, and then the groaning grew louder, almost deafening. The past events circled in my head, and it was driving me insane. I just wanted to wake up, even if it meant I had to jump off the rocky cliff to my death. Then, The tendrils began to slither closer to me. Against my judgment, I ran into the thick fog, running as fast as possible. I stopped in my tracks and felt a firm grasp on my ankle. The slithering mess wrapped its grip and twisted until I fell to my knees from the pain. The crushing was unimaginable. My foot was clenched, and the thing squeezed every nerve until I was sure I would pass out. I started to scream as the pain constricted every nerve in my leg. I felt that my foot was going to snap off. I kicked and pleaded, but I lay in the fog alone, afraid and full of anguish. I yelled, begging for anyone to hear me. I tried grabbing the thing around my neck, but the touch felt like a hot furnace. It squealed an ear-piercing shriek like a kettle and wrapped tighter. I shouted and thrashed my foot in the air. The more I grasped at it, the more I hit it, and the angrier it got. It grabbed my leg in a vice grip, and then I woke up. In a flash, I blasted upright. My heart was pounding, and I found myself back in my bedroom. I was drenched in sweat, and my skin still felt cold, like the dew on the ground where I was in the dream. I looked over to Elaine's side of the bed and saw her stuffed elephant. I grasped it and held it to my chest, inhaling the sweet, intoxicating aroma of Elaine, the smell of her perfume. It was still on her pillow, though slowly fading away. As I got out of bed, I collapsed and hit the ground with a loud thud, landing on my knees. I noticed a sharp pain coming from my ankle. I grabbed the cord to the lamp during my fall, which caused it to fall to the floor in shards. I stood up, sat on the edge of the bed, and looked down at my leg. What I saw shocked me. It shook me to my core. The memories from the night's previous dream hit me like a softball to the skull. I shook my head, dumbfounded. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. There, with a distinct purple hue, was a bruise. It was a bruise wrapped around the top of my foot in a perfect circle. That day, I tried to take my mind off Elaine. The nightmare left me tired and on edge, despite it being a dream. I had to be crazy to think that the dream was genuine. But how do I explain the bruise on my ankle? Was it from the fall? I did my best to shake it off. It was Friday, after all, which meant the weekend would be here soon. I just had to make it through the day. I hobbled to work and let the students have a bit of a free day. I bargained with them and said that if they could stay in their seats and keep the noise down, I would let them spend the rest of the afternoon watching a movie. The day went by fast, and before I knew it, the last bell rang. I gestured goodbye to my students, telling them to have a good weekend, though not as enthusiastically as I usually did. As I did so, something odd happened. I reached into my pocket for my keys and noticed they were gone. I looked all over my desk, drawers, the wastebasket, and the classroom floor. I looked under my desk, and still I found nothing. I began to feel a sense of worry growing from my core. Where were my keys? I know I had them here. Mr. Hughes, sir? I turned around to see little Susie Oakley, a girl from my class. Susie was one of my favorite students. She never gave me any trouble and was always attentive. She stood smiling in front of me, like a hole in space, wearing a beautiful dress. It was the oddest dress I had ever seen. It was a lovely dark red dress with luscious gold patterns falling on the hem. The smile that stretched across her entire face complemented her golden hair. Susie held out my keys between her fingers. "Looking for something?" she giggled. I found them." Susie laughed and handed them over. They plopped into my hand, and I laughed along with her in disbelief. How did she get these? Never mind, it wasn't important. I probably looked silly, searching like a madman still on edge from some nightmare searching for his keys. I regained my composure. "Thanks, Susie." My voice trembling and nervous, still recoiling from my frantic search. "I think I'd lose my mind if I couldn't find these." She smiled and headed towards the door. Suddenly, she stopped and turned to me. "That's just like when you lost them at the beach house," she blurted out. "Remember in Key West?" I was taken aback. What did Susie just say? Beach house? Key West? "Susie, what did you say?" "I said, have a nice weekend, Mr. Hughes." Her voice was like a precious bird's sweet melody. Susie waved to me once again. "I gotta catch the bus," she called out to me. "See you Monday." And before I could respond, she bolted out the door, laughing, catching up with a group of her friends, leaving me in the classroom alone. The beach house? The beach house in Key West? I never told that story to anyone. The only other person who knew that was Elaine. On our trip to Florida, I accidentally locked the keys inside our beach house. Did I hear things? Did I understand that right? How did Susie know that? That night, I went to the bar. It had been so long since my last drink. I wanted to get my mind off the day, trying to forget the odd incident with Susie, the dream. It was just one incident. You're just nervous from last night. Susie doesn't know. Nobody knows about that. Maybe you told your students a long time ago. Yeah, that must be it. I felt a vibration on the table in front of me. I picked up my phone and saw my wife's number. I knew that it was a telemarketer spoofing her number. I was going to be as vicious as possible. I had enough of people messing with me. "What?" My voice was full of annoyance. "Hello," the chipper female voice said. "We have been trying to reach you about your car insurance." "Have you?" I replied, silently making obscene gestures at the phone. "Because we haven't heard from you, this is our last courtesy call before we close your account." "Is it?" "To speak to a representative, press 1 now," the enthusiastic voice continued. "Or, if you are unsatisfied, press 2 to be put on our do not call list." I opened up the keypad and pressed 2. A long pause followed a low bonk. The silence was interrupted and followed by another female voice, more monotone and drearier. "I'm sorry, your call cannot be completed as dialed, as the phone number is no longer in service." Then, the voice whispered as if she was breathing into my ear. "Elaine Hughes is gone." The voice continued. "Elaine is gone. Elaine has left. She has gone away. He is waiting for you. Give yourself to him. He is waiting for you. Give yourself to him. He is waiting for you. He is waiting for you. He is." I hung up the phone and sat in silence at the bar. When I returned home, I was greeted with an empty house. It was my favorite part of the day, returning home, turning on the lights by myself and staring into my foyer's abyss, silent without my wife's voice calling out from the kitchen, telling me that dinner would be ready in a jiffy. I missed those nights more than anything. I missed Elaine's presence. I turned on the television to let the audio carry throughout the house. I went to the kitchen to make dinner, which now consisted of heating up leftovers. I shut the fridge and stared at all of our photos. I looked at a Polaroid of Elaine and me, sitting on the couch at our friend's house during a New Year's Eve party. Elaine was leaned over and kissing me on the cheek, wrapped around me. I was laughing with my eyes shut, looking quite goofy after a few beers and a couple of shots of Captain Morgan. I smiled for the first time in a long while. It was my favorite photo of us, a purple and orange tinted throwback photo using the Instacamera she had gotten me for the previous Christmas. The more I studied the picture, the more I realized something strange. At that moment, I was enveloped in the eeriest sense of dread that I had ever experienced. A small detail so minuscule that were it not for the previous night or the day's events, I would have entirely paid it no mind. When did she get that tattoo? I looked at Elaine's arm. Her shirt was pulled up just enough to notice a thin bluish tattoo protruding from behind her sleeve. It had a round shape at the top and a long form that went down and disappeared behind her sleeve. It couldn't be. I told myself this repeatedly. It was just a flash, a fluke in the Polaroid. I looked at other photos in the kitchen. A picture of us at Matt's pool party, us on spring break, at the zoo. And the tattoo appeared on her wrist in all of them. In the 5 years we were together, she never got a tattoo. There's no way she had one. Absolutely no way. This was impossible. I had seen her nude before, many times. I had caressed every inch of her body, and I knew that my wife didn't have a tattoo, without a doubt. This was not my mind playing tricks on me, not like the keys, not like the phone call in the bar. A tattoo on Lainey's arm? No. And then I had a feeling. An otherworldly sensation like a chill from far away. In my head, I knew this slight feeling was from deep in the universe, a now-off whisper that tickled my eardrums and made me aware of its presence. I felt my head becoming light and sensed an emotion of helplessness. At that moment, I knew that I would return to the dream place like I had visited the previous night. I don't know how I knew this or how I arrived at that conclusion, but this feeling nagged and tugged at me, beckoning me to return. And if I didn't, it would drag me, kicking and screaming. I slid down the counter in our kitchen and placed my head between my knees. I wanted it to end. I wanted the pain to go away. I wanted Lainey here with me. I wanted her to hold me and tell me everything would be all right. I wanted to go on with my life. I crawled onto the floor and laid my head down. As I woke, I saw that I was in the same place as before. I knew it was the same place as I had stood the night before. The green sky, the smell of salt water, and that feeling of the unknown. I braced myself once more and hobbled on my one good foot, keeping close attention to where I stepped. I walked through the green mist for hours, keeping my hands in front of me. The air was so thick it was suffocating and piercing my throat with every breath. I coughed. Finally, I came to a clearing. A soft, pale figure stood and looked at the sky in front of her in the mist. Standing there was Elaine. My love, my sweetheart, my everything. I almost couldn't believe it. I wanted to tell her everything about the dream last night. The girl from my class, the phone call, the tattoo, everything. I ran up to her and hugged her tight, just as I did the morning she died. Elaine, what are you doing? I thought I had lost you." She looked at me with a blank expression. I then remembered her arms. I took her arm and saw that pieces had been flayed from her skin. Her wrists were covered in scars, and parts of her bones were visible through the slits of torn flesh. Her arm was discolored, and gray veins protruded from her skinny, malnourished limbs. Spots of yellow, purple, and brown appeared along her arm, as if she had been struck thousands of times. "Oh, baby, what happened to your arm?" I pulled her arm and noticed the tattoo on her wrist. Not by a delicate artist, the ink had not been set, but branded by some jagged instrument. I saw tiny purple holes where someone had missed, puncturing her skin. The tattoo was of a crude outline of a man, like the one you would find on those men's bathroom signs, but the proportions were all wrong. The man had a long torso, extended arms, and stretched out legs that made him appear taller than the average man. His head was completely obscured. I grabbed her arm and held her hand close to my face. Her skin was cold, more bitter than frozen meat. The touch was like a slab, a crisp metallic sheet. It was lifeless. I looked into her eyes and saw nothing left of her, mentally or physically. She watched as she did before. She looked hollow and devoid of any feeling. Everything about her was bare. She spoke with a monotone and slow pace. "I am your humble servant, and I give myself to you," Elaine said without emotion. "The crawling chaos, the god of 1,000 forms, I give my life to you." She gave a name, but one that I couldn't make out. At that moment, I was confused and angry, not at her, but at this place. Like during the previous night, the more I remained here, the more I was slithering into agony. "Elle, what are you talking about? Stop messing around with me. Let's go." I pulled on her arm, yet she remained rooted in the ground. It was like pulling on a chain-link fence. "Lainey, please," I begged. "Please, let's just go home." "I am your humble servant, and I give myself to you," she repeated in the same pattern. "The crawling chaos, the god of 1,000 forms, I give my life to you." Elaine grabbed my arm and made me let go. She never made eye contact with me directly. I saw my love, Elaine, retreat into the mist. The fog consumed her, leaving me alone. I called out to her, hoping against hope that she would come out of the haze and run to me with her arms outstretched. I stood there motionless, with only the buzzing air surrounding me. At that moment, I felt dead. I felt every emotion leave my body. I collapsed onto the cold, rocky floor of this mysterious void. I was defeated. Then, a tall, shadowy figure formed from the sky above me. The figure was at least 8 feet tall and resembled a man. His eyes were a deep color, one that I can't describe. It was hideous. The thing's presence was immense. The only description I can convey is that its aura, the atmosphere surrounding him, was timeless and unchanging. It was a being of unimaginable horror. The figure wore a long coat made from the nighttime sky. As it swayed in the breeze, the stars changed patterns. The thing wore a hat that covered his face, obscuring it, so only his eyes appeared from behind the wall of shadow. It wasn't Satan or the devil. No, this thing was far more terrible. The thing told me its name. Those 5 syllables sent a chill down my spine. Elaine's same name. It spoke to me. It spoke to me without opening its eyes, mouth, or any orifice on its body. As it spoke, I heard a short whisper, its yawning yet screeching voice that sounded like a piece of metal being scraped across a rock. Each syllable sounded like a hammer falling in an empty, lonely cave. As it spoke, it told me I needed it. It said that I would be its servant, its messenger. The thing told me to bring more people here, to convince them to gather here, in this location, to overthrow their superiors. There was so much resentment between it and another god. Things were coming to an end. That the expiration of life as we know it was drawing closer and closer. It told me how it would return to our reality, create destruction, and unleash its final plan for this world. The thing told me that many had fallen. Many worlds that once flourished were left in nothingness. The thing told me it had fed off the misery, on the suffering of others, and how it had destroyed entire civilizations, colonies of people across time. The thing prophesied that it would finally get its revenge on the human species, which the being called dead, ignorant, and stupid pink meat. As it continued speaking, I felt my sanity slip away. I felt my arms become weak. Every bone in my body began to rattle as the thing spoke its foul language to me. That grotesque and ugly, horrible thing that sat in the sky, which I won't describe further, said it was almost time to have my Elaine back, if I did what it wanted. My Elaine. The thing used those words. Your Elaine. It was a phrase that sent a shiver through my body. I asked the thing a question which I should have requested from the start. Why? The thing told me that Elaine had prayed to it. In her dying breaths, she had given her soul to a deity that appeared to her. It allowed her life to continue, serving him in the afterlife. The thing told me that this was the last time I would see it, that I should fulfill my end of the bargain, and if I didn't, the evil thing said, it would crush me and that I would never see Elaine again. I knew what I had to do. If it meant saving Elaine, I would submit myself to this being. I had plenty of family members and friends, all of whom would join me by choice or necessity. The entity told me it preferred children, and I should provide him with as many of them as possible. It was for Elaine, I told myself. All for her. Through the written word, I hope to reach more people. I've written my testament here. I've found that the truth of what's beyond our reality is far more terrifying through my account. The elements haunting the human species have never been depicted in their purest form with words or configuration. What lies beyond this world is an abstract plane inhabited by cruel creatures and unsettling beings, which slumber underneath lost cities and gargantuan summits. As a witness to this place and its elements, I feel that it's my job to put my experiences to paper, even if not a single person listens to my pleas or records. Here, I write and pen this account in his name, the messenger of the Outer Ones, the faceless God, the God of 1,000 forms, and the crawling chaos. I have joined him, and soon you will too.
And that was Grand Electric Gestures of Love by Mario E. Martinez. A good reminder to always follow your heart. Might not always turn out the way you expected it to, but okay. So maybe don't always follow your heart. But let's be reasonable here. Our next story is in the second-person perspective. That means your ass is about to have an interesting day at the office. Again, from author Mario E. Martinez, I give you The Light at the End of the Hall. You like the office now. Ever since Gina left you, work has been a sanctuary. Yeah, a little hiding place. The coffee mug wasn't a gift from your grandmother. The bathroom didn't smell like potpourri and fruit-infused shampoo. It's just you, a desk, your research, and the halls. It is the first day of the winter break. 3 uninterrupted weeks where the campus is deserted except for a skeleton crew of maintenance workers and administrators way off on the northern edge of the campus. Yeah. Walking into your building, a bag of groceries in one hand and a messenger bag hanging from your shoulder, you're relieved to find it empty. The back entrance, which opens directly to a stairwell and hall, is dark until you take a step inside. The motion sensors pick up your movements and turn on the lights. They flicker and hum, but eventually stay bright. Upstairs, the hall is dark until you walk into it. Like the first floor, sensors caught your movement and light your way. The hall is long, most of the wooden doors windowless with notes from desperate students taped to them. Your office in the main suite isn't far into it, which you like. The entirety of your happiness begins at the back entrance, inhabits your empty office, and ends with the communal bathrooms only a few yards away. You've learned from experience that before long, the lights at the end of the hall would sense no movement and turn off, leaving only half the hallway lit. At first, you found it unsettling, but it grew on you, let you focus on what you needed to do. The door to the office suite is thankfully locked. Inside, the cold tingles on your cheeks and you smile a little bit because it means no one is there. You take the groceries, some convenience store ham, cheese, mayo, and a loaf of bread, and go to the break room. You place the groceries next to the quart of milk already in there and make coffee. Normally you don't drink the crystallized stuff. You're more French roast than coffee by the tub, as Gina used to say. She loved your taste in coffee, and when she left, the smell of gourmet coffee sent you on a binge of self-loathing that almost got you fired. While the coffee maker drips, you close your eyes and take in big sniffs of coffee, and you're not exactly happy that you don't feel queasy at the smell. It's more like satisfaction that you survived for another day. The coffee is bitter, and from the smell, the remainder of the milk went bad. The sugar doesn't help, but you drink it anyway. At your desk, you slip off your shoes and work in your socks. The research you're doing is half-hearted and overcomplicated, but you do it because it forces you to read a bunch of books written by a man who only wrote novels through the perspectives of asexual trees, and not once has it mentioned lovers or wives or anything that reminds you of Gina or the divorce. The few pages you've written are shit and you know it. There wouldn't be a committee in North America that would publish it, even with your semi-famous name. Still, the man was prolific and time-consuming. You drink your coffee and read. You turn on the computer and open a blank document meant for interest about the man's novel, A Birch at the Edge of the World. But it's still blank even after 3 hours. The urge to piss gets you out of your cubicle and out into the hall. Except for the lights in the front of your suite and the bathroom nearby, the hall's dark once more. Before you cross the hall, you look into the dark until you can somewhat make out the shapes of the doors. For a second, knowing you're alone, you want to scream. Not words, but just let all the pleas and curses and whimpers all compress into one giant bark that you'll vomit out into the dark. Yeah. Instead, you go into the bathroom and piss sitting down, turning the blue water a sickly yellow-green. You sit there longer than you have to, and the motion-triggered lights turn off after a while. You sigh, pull up your pants, and step out of the stall. The lights come back on, and you're confronted with your own face in the mirror. It makes you wonder where all the years went, and then you remember that Gina took them along with the cat, which you didn't like anyway. You were a young man when you met her, and spent the better part of a decade courting her, and now she was gone. The faucet water is cold, and it snaps you out of your momentary trance. You dry your hands with the hand dryer on the wall. The noise and the warmth feel good against your skin. Even when your hands are dry, you hit the button once more and cup your hands as if you were trying to catch the air. You go back out into the hall, the heat slowly fading from your hands, and something at the end of the hall catches your eye. The light at the end of the hall is on. Between you and it is at least 20 yards of darkness. At first, you think that one of the maintenance crew went into the storage room there and used the stairwell on the other side of the building. The door to the supply room has no window, so there will be no way to see anyone in there. But you stand there and wait for something to happen. You step back a little and open the bathroom door, putting yourself inside a bit. You figure that catching someone as they walk out of a bathroom is preferable to catching a lone professor standing in the hall waiting for you. As it is, you know the office rumor mill is in full swing. Ever since the months leading to your divorce, you've caught your colleagues whispering that you aren't well, that the stress has made you subpar. You don't realize how long you've fixated on the idea of your colleagues, and the light at the end of the hall goes out, resting until it senses some movement. You step out into the hall and let the door ease shut behind you. You wonder what a maintenance worker could be doing in a cramped closet for so long, and so quietly. Usually the radios on their belts clicked and scratched endlessly. The fact that there was no light visible from under the door strikes you as odd and somehow unnerving. Something had to trigger the light, but there would be no real way to trigger it, and only it, without more lights being turned on. Thinking of this makes you feel uneasy. The dark and the door hidden in it. You've seen it before on nights where you stay so late the only one goes around are policemen and the glowing lights of the library, which is open all night. Once on your way to class, you even saw what was inside the closet. A spare push cart, shelves of toilet paper and cleaners, and a plain cement floor with a drain in the center. You picture those things as though cataloging their commonness will make you feel better. But if anything, it makes you fixate on the drain. In your mind, it grows from the size of a CD to the size of a manhole cover, and then to the size of one of those cartoon bank vaults, with doors that roll open or closed. The holes, too. They get bigger until not only drops of liquid could go through it, but a man. You get closer to the drain in your head, but the dark there is too thick to see through. You peek further and still see nothing but the dark, except you get the sudden feeling that you're not alone in that drain pipe. Yeah, there isn't a sound, not a whisper nor a breath, but you know that something is there. As quickly as you left it, you're back in the hall, standing in the only patch of light. You haven't moved, but your body feels like it's walked a very long way. You decide that all of it, the feeling and fatigue, could be banished with a sandwich. At your office door, you give the dark hall one last look before going and making yourself a plain ham sandwich. You've had so many of them now that they don't taste like nothing anymore. This doesn't bother you. The alternative is ordering from all the places Gina liked. She was a lousy cook, and so are you. Sitting alone in the break room, you eat because your body doesn't want to die. That's all. By the time you get back to your desk, it's past 2, but it's all kinds of meaningless. With the office empty, you'll stay well past 10 and drive home to shower and sleep. Lately, you haven't even turned on the lights when you get there. You navigate by memory. Memory of the way it was before Gina took the love seat and bar stools. Yeah, you shower in the dark until the hot water turns cold. And even then, you stay in it so long you tremble all night. At least the office has books, which you've read or authored, and solitaire, which you are terrible at now. Still, after the books make your eyes hurt, and you broke down and cracked the window to smoke, you play solitaire over and over again. The losses mean very little to you. You expect them. And the victories, though seldom, mean more to you than you think they should. In the middle of one such moment, the cards bouncing all over the screen with blasts of confetti and fireworks, you cry. You don't try to reason with it, you just cry. Once you're sufficiently tired, fortified for that long night ahead only by another ham sandwich, you save your work and turn off your computer. You collect your things and go to the door. Handle in hand, you hesitate for a second, thinking about the light at the end of the hall. But you tell yourself it's just a faulty bulb. You open the door and the light is off. This makes you smile. Looking at it as proof that all those weird feelings were nothing but nerves from the divorce. Yeah. All those thoughts of the drain and what was in it were nothing but the aches of a brain under too much stress. You look at the dock and want to laugh at yourself, and you would if you didn't find the whole thing sad. Then something moves within it, or so you think. The sight or thought of it gives you pause, and for a long time, you'll search in the dark for some proof of anything, any explanation. The dark gives you nothing. A part of you fears that. Another tells you to step forward. But the second part sounds like Gina when she was in one of her moods. It's telling you that a real man would step right to it without hesitation. A real man wouldn't even think to be afraid of nothing. It takes you a second, but you do. The first few steps have you in the semi-darkness, but with the next, the automatic lights go on. You illuminate the next 2 segments evenly, not boldly, but without stopping. The end of the hall is becoming clearer, the door frame a little more visible. It unnerves you that you can't see more of it, like the dark around it is made of thicker stuff than what occupied the rest of the hall. The thought gets so big that you can't move anymore. You don't want to get closer, but you want to know. Need to know. You fish a nickel out of your pocket and toss it at the end of the hall, hoping it'll be enough to trigger the lights. The sound the heavy coin makes in the hall shocks you, but the sensors picked it up and the fluorescent lights click on. At the end of the hall there is a door with no window, and the words maintenance employees only stenciled onto it. Seeing it makes you breathe easier. It makes turning your back to it bearable, though when you do, you still feel a little nervous doing so. That unease follows you down the stairs and into your car, leaving only when the radio comes on, and it's Gina's favorite song. In the morning you wake up tired from bouts of vivid dreams. Their strangeness follows you all morning. You felt in your dreams that you were awake. Your sheets and shorts were not there, but there was nothing to see. All there was a bubble of darkness all around you. You couldn't move. It felt, you recall, like you were not alone, as if something inside the dark were looking at you, sizing you up. Before long, you knew somehow that the other thing in the dark was responsible for it all. The paralysis, the blindness. It senses your knowledge and gets closer, moving through the impenetrable dark as though it were water. You know it is only inches away, and then a sound filled your mind. A clicky hum of fluorescence. In that instant, you are both comforted and horrified that a light is going to turn on. You woke up never knowing what it was, but you feel it somehow in all the shadows of the house, in the dark spots of the city on the way to the office. With that feeling so intense, you park your car a block away so you don't have to brave the parking garage. At the stairwell door, you find you're the only one there again, the fluorescence clicking on just for you. The sound triggers something in you, the same dread as the dream, and it makes you jump a little. That embarrasses you, and you walk the rest of the way in shame. Somehow, the stairs feel like they're longer. On the second floor, the hall is dark until you enter, and as they do every morning, the lights rush on in a wave of illumination. But this time, the light at the end of the hall stays off. This stops you, and for a second, you think of the dream and the drain, and it strikes you that maybe the light stayed off because something wanted it to. You stare at it until you get the idea that the dark is looking right back at you. You lock the office door behind you and turn on all the lights, banishing any shadows there. It gives you a small sense of ease, enough at least to make coffee and dry toast. It's not long before the tingles of fear come back. At your desk, thoroughly making notations in cadence of cedars, it strikes you that there are no windows on the door, and that the hall is carpeted. Momentarily, you're not sure what these facts mean, except that you think the meaning spells some sort of danger. Slowly, you understand that anyone or anything could walk up and down the hall unheard. For all you know, whatever thing hounding you from all the dark places was right outside the door, waiting. The thought pulls you from your desk and takes you to the door. You get down on all fours, nearly putting your cheek on the carpet, and try to look under the door. There's nothing there that you can see, but the thought won't leave you. There is something out there, and you know it. The rest of the day, you're a prisoner in your office suite. At first, you stopped drinking coffee so you wouldn't need to urinate, which only makes the urge come rushing in harder. You try to fight it, hoping to wheel it away. Survival trumps the body's baser needs. You break down finally and piss in the break room sink with the water running. The act partially disgusts you, and yet still fills you with a sense of pride at your decisiveness. A single sandwich is all you allow yourself since there was no place in the office to defecate. By 8, you've peed in the sink 3 times and feel lightheaded from hunger. There is a small leather couch beside the department chair's door. You lie on it as best you can to close your eyes a moment and conserve energy. Thankfully, the couch is too uncomfortable to sleep deeply, and the dreams won't be able to find you. not like last night. After a few minutes, you aren't awake anymore. You're hovering in the haze between sleep and consciousness. In that state, you fixed your restless mind focused on the office doorknob. The layout of the suite affords you a view of it, and from behind your fluttering eyelids, you can't help but stare at it, half expecting it to move. You try to rouse yourself awake when that fear wells up, but once you see that it's still, your eyes close and all you think in that millisecond before temporary oblivion is, what if it turns now? And your eyes shoot open again, repeating the cycle for hours. You get up feeling like hell. Your lower back is tight, and your intestines feel like they've been tied into a slip knot. You blink the fog of sleep away and stand, the motion nearly knocking you back on your seat. You walk up to the break room enough to look out the window. It's dark. The lamppost bright. You find the clock and see that it's well past 2 in the morning. Still groggy, the shock of the time makes you want to collect your things and go home. You push the feeling aside and sit down again. There is something outside the door, waiting for you. The thought keeps repeating itself until you get hungry again. You make and eat your sandwich mechanically. You wash it down with tap water. Even in the break room, you stare at the wall as though you can see through it to the office door. You keep your eyes trained that way as you walk out of the break room. By force of habit, you turn off the lights but quickly turn them on again. You don't want the dark anywhere in the suite. It makes you feel better that the dark had been banished from the suite. You don't get far before you think about all the empty offices. Sure, you work in a cubicle, but there are 6 office doors locked and windowless, all of them enriched by the dark. Your mind fills with images of the pregnant dark behind those doors, and wonder about this shadow feeling that's nagged you all day. You consider the idea that the shadow could move through the dark, the same as you would a door, which terrifies you, but explains how it could be everywhere. But a second thought, a worse one, washes over you and leaves you stunned. What if there's more than one shadow, you ask? What if the dark spots are like snake holes, to each a creature, an entity, all of them different in temperament and proportion, united only in their want of you? That thought has its way with the suite, the reassuring silence turning ominous and foreboding. Yeah, you backpedal, eyes trained on the doors, more specifically their knobs. Groping with clammy hands, you find the break room and slip into it. Your panic doubles when you find nothing there to help you. The knives are all for butter, and there's not a fork to be found. At last, you settle on your director's coffee mug, a big pretentious cup covered in Rembrandt's The Night's Watch in miniature. Satisfied, you grasp the handle and smash it in the sink. The crash reminds you of how silent the building is. Now your fist is clasping only a handle and the sharp remains of the cup. You touch the broken edges with your finger, testing its sharpness. At first, it doesn't satisfy you at all, until you slice your finger open. The pain comes and goes in a flash, and your finger is in your mouth. You walk out into the suite, arm cocked and ready to punch. You see and hear nothing. It fills you with the dread and drenches you in sweat. You keep expecting the doors to open and to unleash whatever shadow is hidden there. The strategy, you think, is to find the door that would open and be there ready. But then you think, perhaps they're all working in concert. That one door will prompt another and another. That if you were to strike at one, 3 more would descend upon you. Slowly, you back away from the main space, inching toward the door. Your eyes move from one door to the next with such haste you feel dizzy. As you touch the doorknob, you clench your fist together around the broken cup and turn around. You know something is out there, waiting. It wants you to come out and meet it. For a long time, you do nothing. You turn the knob, expecting something to rush in at the sound of the turning and unlocking. You open the door fast and punch out with the broken cup. Your eyes are closed, but you still expect to feel an impact, except all you hit is air. Thrown off balance, you open your eyes to regain your feet and see that there's nothing in the hall but you. The quick motion spooked the lights back on, but as before, the last light remained off. The sight nearly drives you back into the office, but something stops you. A voice. Not one around you, but from within. Yeah, it's Gina's voice, a sentence she uttered a few years into her marriage. She'd been talking to her cousin, unaware you were home, and said,
"No, he doesn't hit me or treat me bad. It's just, he's a pussy."
The memory enrages you. That day, you'd gone back to the front door and opened and closed it loudly. That day, she'd been right. Now she was wrong. Broken cup in hand, you marched down the hall, telling yourself not to look, not to think about all the other doors or all the shadows. You stay focused on the end of the hall and the dark there. The closer you come to it, the more you wait for some shape to materialize, some creature to form. But all there is a plain door that reads maintenance, employees only. Testing it, you put your fist and cup into the dark and find only air, no different than the other end of the hall. You move your arm back and forth slowly. The light flashes on, sending you back a step. All the lights are on, and you are alone. But you don't feel at ease. Not yet. The door is solid, and the dark drain sits inside it. Hands still bleeding, you reach out for the door handle and touch it. The fact that it feels solid and cold does nothing to calm you. Lifting your cup, you grab the knob and find it unlocked. You close your eyes against a rush of images, crude nightmares dancing in your skull, and swing the door open, not knowing what stands there waiting for you and from where it came. You find inside that room that all was as you imagined it to be. Your scream cuts through the empty building, where it dies, alone.
Chilling tales for dark nights.